It was just a regular night for Lena Ross. She had a truckload of supplies bound for Tucson, Arizona, rolling down the 10 West, cruising through the endless desert under a pitch-black sky. Just her, the hum of the engine, and the crackling static of her CB radio filling the cabin. Lena had been on the road long enough to know how to shut out the monotony of driving. She didn't mind the isolation. In fact, she preferred it. There's a freedom that comes with the road, an untethered kind of peace, like the world outside was just a shadow, fading into the rearview mirror as you drove further into the dark. Tonight, the air felt thick, the kind of thick that made the night seem endless. The headlights cut through the emptiness ahead, but everything else felt muffled. Even the static on her CB was heavier than usual. Lena flicked the knob on the radio, trying to adjust it. The road stretched out, winding like a snake across the desert. She was so used to the isolation, but tonight even the wind felt strange, almost oppressive, as if it were trying to squeeze through the cab windows. She turned the CB up just to break the silence. Breaker 19. This is Big Mama. Anyone out? There? She called into the mic just to see if anyone would bite. The usual trucker chatter filled her ears. Some jokers talking about their routes, a guy who'd been running late, another swapping ghost stories from the road. It was harmless, just background noise to keep the hours from dragging. But tonight something felt off. She fiddled with the dials again, searching for a different channel. The static buzzed louder than it should have. Almost like it was trying to say something. She paused, her fingers hovering over the knobs. A shiver ran up her spine, but she brushed it off, shaking her head. It was just the desert playing tricks. The darkness out here had a way of making your mind wander. She clicked the mic once more. Breaker 19, this is Big Mama, come back. Her voice was steadier this time, but her fingers clenched around the mic as if she were waiting for something. At first, there was nothing. Silence. Then, Big Mama. The voice that crackled through the radio wasn't a familiar trucker's drawl, nor the gruff sound of a trucker trying to make a joke. It was different, thin, far away, like someone was calling from a different dimension, one that stretched just beyond the edges of her hearing. She leaned forward, squinting at the radio like she could will it to reveal more. Her heart skipped. A beat, Big Mama, the voice repeated, a soft, rasping whisper. I need your help. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted to the mirror, half expecting to see someone in the dark behind her. She cleared her throat, trying to push the unease aside. Who is this? She asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. The voice didn't answer right away. Instead, there was a faint rustling like papers flipping through the air. A low, uneven breathing filled the radio. Then, finally, You don't know me, but you can hear me. The voice sounded weaker now, desperate, as though it were struggling to hold on to the thread of communication. Lena's fingers were slick on the steering wheel. She glanced at the dark, empty road ahead. There was no one out here for miles, and yet she gripped the mic again, trying to shake off the tension rising in her chest. I'm listening. Who are you? She asked, her tone sharper now. She couldn't explain it, but something about this felt too real, too raw. There was a pause before the voice spoke again. Don't listen to them, it whispered. They'll try to pull you in too. Just leave the radio off and you'll be safe. Lena's grip on the mic tightened. The words felt wrong. And then the static intensified again, as if something were pushing against the airwaves, trying to flood her senses with more than just words. Please, the voice begged, sounding increasingly distressed. You don't want to end up like me. I'm trapped here. I've been trapped here. I've been calling it for so long. Lena's heartbeat quickened. Trapped. She glanced out the window again, still unable to shake the feeling that she wasn't alone on the road anymore. There was a weight to the silence now, something thick and suffocating that hadn't been there before. A prickling sense of danger crept up the back of her neck. Who's trapped? She asked, her voice trembling despite her attempt to remain steady. The voice shuddered through the static, a sob escaping just barely through the crackling noise. I'm one of them, it whispered. I didn't listen, I didn't leave, and now they won't let me go. The words sent a cold chill down her spine. Lena was about to speak to ask who exactly was talking to her when the static came to a sharp, jagged halt. For a brief moment, the radio was silent. Then, in a voice much clearer than before, too clear, the voice said, "Now they're coming for you." Lena's hand shot back from the mic as if it had burned her. Her eyes widened in the rearview mirror, expecting, no, dreading, to see someone standing there. But the highway behind her was still empty. There was nothing, just the thick, swirling darkness. She shook her head. She had to be imagining things. This was just the loneliness of the road getting to her. The radio buzzed again, louder now, scraping against her skull like fingernails on a chalkboard. The voice was gone, but the air felt thick, like she was submerged in water. Her hands trembled as she fiddled with the dial, trying to turn the radio off, but it wouldn't budge. The static continued, and then, just when she thought the tension would break her, the voice returned. But this time it was different. Urgent. Panic-filled. "Lena," it gasped. "I'm not alone. They're here. The ones who never left. They want you to join them." Her heart skipped in her chest. The name. How did it know her name? Lena's mind raced, her thoughts a jumbled mess. What the hell was happening? She wasn't alone. She had to be imagining things. This was just some trick, some interference. The desert played with your mind in ways you couldn't predict. But the voice, it sounded so real, so desperate. And then she heard it. The sound that made her blood run cold. A faint tapping at the window. Lena's head snapped to the side, her breath catching in her throat. Nothing. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the door handle, but the radio crackled again, this time, with something more sinister. Laughter, cold, hollow, and distant. It echoed across the frequency, a cacophony of voices, all laughing, all watching, her pulse hammered in her ears. She jerked the truck off the road, the tires screeching as she slammed to a halt on the shoulder. Her fingers flew over the dials, but nothing worked. The laughter was growing louder, more urgent, now mixed with faint whispers that slipped into her mind, like they were coming from all around her. "Join us. Come closer." Lena's breath was shallow now. She slammed her fist against the dashboard, trying to fight the overwhelming sense of dread clawing at her chest. But the radio, oh God, the radio wouldn't stop. She grabbed the mic one more time, nearly yanking it out of its socket. "I'm not listening," she shouted into the static. "I'm not going anywhere." But the laughter continued, unbroken, and the voices, they were coming for her. Lena sat in the driver's seat, her hands trembling as they gripped the wheel. The truck was no longer idling. It was almost as if the engine itself had a mind of its own. The tires churned over gravel and sand with an eerie smoothness, as if they were gliding on something far beyond the road beneath them. The headlights cut through the dust in sharp, cold beams, illuminating nothing but darkness stretching out endlessly ahead. The world outside seemed to fade in and out like a dream, flickering in the corner of her vision, just out of reach. The radio had gone silent, but not in a comforting way. It was as though the static itself had formed a presence in the truck. Heavy, suffocating. It seemed to hum in the air, making the walls of the cabin pulse with an unnatural energy. Lena could hear her heartbeat, and it sounded loud against the dead silence of the road. "Come closer," the voice had whispered moments ago. The words had been soft, like a lover's beckoning. Yet they filled her mind with an all-consuming fear. She glanced over at the dashboard, where the CB mic sat in its holder, untouched. She could feel the pull, like an invisible thread tugging at her. She couldn't explain it, but somehow she knew the voice was still there, watching her, waiting. Her fingers twitched toward the mic. She had to speak to it, had to know what it wanted, but a part of her screamed to stay away. "Whatever this is, don't engage with it." She ignored that part. The pull was too strong. With a hesitant breath, Lena reached for the mic. The metal felt cold against her fingertips. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking too loud would wake the thing she feared. The CB crackled in response, but the voice didn't come immediately. Instead, it was as if the hum deepened, settling in the back of her skull, a vibration that reverberated through her, making the truck feel as though it were alive. like the metal had a pulse, the engine a breath. Then a voice broke through. But it wasn't just one voice. It was a chorus of voices, all layered on top of each other. Each one whispered, murmured, cried, but they all carried the same tone, soft, drawn out, insistent. "We know you, Lena." The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and her chest tightened. The voice felt personal, like someone knew her deepest secrets, knew her weaknesses. "We've been waiting for you. We've always been here." Lena slammed her hand over, the mic cutting the transmission. But the voices didn't stop. They never stopped. They reverberated in her mind now, twisting through her thoughts like 1,000 threads, pulling at her consciousness. Her fingers felt slick with sweat. She wiped them on her jeans, but they were still cold, like a constant chill had seeped into her bones. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles ached. But it didn't help. The hum, that endless, suffocating hum, was growing. Louder, crawling into her skull, filling her head like the weight of it was going to crush her. Lena blinked hard, trying to clear her mind. The road in front of her was an endless stretch of cracked pavement. The headlights illuminated nothing but shadows, nothing but the black emptiness that seemed to be closing in on her. Suddenly, a flash of light caught her eye in the rear view mirror. It was brief, almost imperceptible, like a flicker of motion, a hint of movement just beyond her sight. For a moment, Lena thought she imagined it, but then it happened again, this time more pronounced. A figure. Her pulse quickened. She jerked her head to look in the rearview mirror, her breath coming in shallow bursts. There was nothing, but there was something out there, behind her. She knew it. She could feel it. Something was out there, waiting in the darkness, watching her. The truck lurched suddenly like it had hit a pothole, but when Lena checked the road ahead, it was smooth, untouched. The tires didn't seem to hit anything, but the radio buzzed. The static was thicker now, harder to ignore. It sounded like a distortion of voices, like 1,000 whispers were fighting for space, clawing their way through the airwaves. Lena. It was softer this time. Not quite a whisper, but not a voice either. Something in between, almost like a breath carried through the speakers. It was so close now she could almost hear the words in her own head. She slammed her foot on the brakes, feeling the truck's massive weight drag as it skidded on the road, trying to regain control. But when she looked ahead, her eyes widened in terror. There was a shape on the horizon now, something that had not been there a moment ago. It wasn't just a figure, it was a road. The asphalt stretched out before her like a path that had been carved into the desert, wide and untouched by time. It was a dark road, darker than any road she had ever seen. It stretched out infinitely, no end in sight, leading into a pitch-black void where there should have been stars. Lena felt her stomach flip. This wasn't right. This wasn't on the map. There were no roads out here, no official routes, nothing for miles. And yet here it was, taunting her, beckoning her to follow it. The radio hissed again, the voices multiplying until they were all she could hear, all she could feel. The air inside the truck turned colder. Her breath came out in foggy bursts, her face flushed despite the chill. "You're here now, Lena." She closed her eyes, her pulse roaring in her ears. She couldn't escape. She couldn't go back. It was like the road had already pulled her in. And now it wanted something. The headlights caught something ahead, and Lena's breath caught in her throat. A figure stood at the edge of the road. A person. No, not a person. A shadow. It was dark and shapeless, a silhouette of something she couldn't quite make out, yet the air around it seemed to warp like heat rising off pavement. The figure was wrong. Her foot hovered over the brake pedal, her fingers stiff on the wheel. It didn't move, didn't speak, but she could feel its eyes on her, those eyes, even though she couldn't see them. "You can't leave now, Lena." The voice was so close she could feel it inside her chest. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from the figure. She slammed her foot down on the gas, jerking the truck forward, but it didn't help. It never helped. The truck seemed to slide forward on its own, drawn to that road, to that presence. Come closer. Lena didn't know how much time had passed. Minutes, hours. The road seemed to stretch on forever. The figure in the distance never moved, but its presence haunted her, like a shadow that followed her in the corner of her eye. And then, with a suddenness that almost made Lena scream, she found herself stopping, right at the edge of the road. Right, at the threshold of something she couldn't understand. The truck idled, its engine humming. The radio crackled again, but this time there was no voice, no whisper, only a heavy silence that smothered her. Lena didn't know whether to step out of the truck or to stay hidden within it. Something about the road in front of her felt wrong. But the presence behind her, the shadow, was almost unbearable now, pulling at her from the back of her mind, as if it were waiting for her to make a choice. And deep down, Lena knew there was only one road left to take. Lena's heart thudded loudly in her chest, matching the rhythm of the truck's engine as it idled beneath her. The truck was still. The world outside was still. It was as though the very air had frozen around her, thick and suffocating. The cold was crawling under her skin, but it wasn't from the outside. No, this was deeper. It was the cold of something ancient, something waiting, watching. She swallowed hard, the taste of metal sharp on her tongue. The shadows outside seemed to stretch, elongate, as if they were creeping closer inch by inch. There was no moon tonight, no stars. The night felt too black, like the sky itself had been suffocated by the darkness below. The figure, that thing, was still standing just out of view, lurking somewhere just beyond the beam of the headlights. Lena had not seen it move since she first spotted it in the distance, yet she felt its presence growing stronger, more insistent. For a long moment, Lena didn't know what to do. The truck had come to a stop all on its own, the wheel turning gently as if guided by invisible hands. There was no clear reason for her to be here, no logical explanation for why she had followed this road that shouldn't exist, into the middle of nowhere. But she was here, and the voices on the radio had stopped. For now. Lena wasn't sure whether the silence was a blessing or a curse, but she couldn't stay still forever. She had no choice. Taking a deep breath, she reached for the door handle. Her fingers, slick with sweat, trembled as she gripped it. She had to see it. She had to understand what was pulling her into this nightmare. If she stayed here too long, she'd go mad. But if she left, if she walked away from the road, she could still feel the weight of the figure's presence behind her, pressing in on her from the edges of her mind. The door opened with a groan. The cold outside rushed in, wrapping around her like a shroud. But it was the silence that hit her hardest, the same silence that had made her feel so unseen inside the truck, the kind of silence where something else was watching, waiting. She stepped out, her boots crunching softly against the gravel. The night air was bitter, colder than any winter she had ever experienced, and it burned her lungs as she took a deep breath. There was no sound of wind, no rustling of leaves, just a heavy, suffocating quiet that seemed to fill her ears. What is this place? Lena's mind raced, the questions tumbling over each other. The road behind her, was it even real? Was this all some kind of dream? How could she have driven so far off course? She had seen no signs, no markers, no mileposts. The map didn't show anything beyond this stretch of the highway, and the radio had crackled to life out here in the middle of nowhere, off the grid, outside the system. She stood there for a moment, staring down the empty road. The headlights still shone behind her, casting long shadows that twisted unnaturally against the desert floor, but they couldn't reach all the way to the figure. The darkness where the figure stood was impenetrable, a void deeper than the night itself. Come closer. The voice came again, but it wasn't from the radio anymore. This voice was real, too real. It slithered under her skin, vibrating in her bones. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The voice was coming from the road, from that figure standing just beyond the light. She took a step forward, her legs shaking, unsure whether she was walking toward her death or simply toward something she couldn't yet comprehend. "Who are you?" Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out. "What do you want from me?" The figure didn't answer. Lena took another step, the ground beneath her feet shifting strangely, like it wasn't solid earth but something softer, more fluid. The gravel crunched beneath her boots, but with every step it felt like she was sinking into the ground, as though the earth itself was pulling her down. A shadow flickered at the edges of her vision, something in the dark. She froze, every muscle in her body locking tight. The figure was closer now. Lena could make out the shape more clearly, a tall, ragged silhouette. A man? No, it was too vague, too wrong. The closer she got, the more she realized it wasn't just the figure. That unsettled her. It was the way it didn't seem to be standing in the normal sense. It was floating, hovering just above the ground, as though it was tethered to the air by some invisible force. There was something unnatural about its movement, or lack thereof. The edges of it blurred, like it was caught between dimensions. Lena's pulse quickened. The air around her seemed to grow colder. Too cold. She shivered, wrapping her arms around herself, but it didn't help. The cold was from the inside now, gnawing at her bones, making her feel hollow, empty. The figure's eyes glowed faintly, a sickly green that pierced the dark. They weren't human. Nothing about this figure was human. It wasn't even a ghost. Not in the traditional sense. Lena could sense that much. This was something different, something ancient that didn't belong in the world of the living. Her mouth went dry. She wanted to scream, she wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. They were frozen, rooted to the spot by some unseen force. She couldn't look away. The figure raised its hand and the air seemed to bend with it, distorting, twisting. Lena's breath caught in her throat as the figure reached for her. Its movements were slow, deliberate, like it was savoring every second of her fear. "You've come far, Lena," it whispered, its voice low and gravelly like the rumble of thunder in the distance. "Farther than you should have, but you don't get to leave." Lena's heart skipped a beat. Her legs finally found the strength to move, but only enough to stagger backward, away from the thing that was now towering over her. Her hands scrambled for the truck door, but the cold had already set into her chest, turning everything numb, heavy. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No. Please. I didn't mean to." But the figure only tilted its head, its empty eyes gleaming. It didn't care, it never cared. "You're mine now," it said. "You'll stay with us forever." Lena's breath caught. The voices on the radio were back, louder now, a symphony of whispers, all speaking at once, filling her mind until she couldn't tell where one ended and another began. She scrambled into the truck, her hands fumbling as she tried to get the engine running. The truck roared to life and she slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The tires squealed, and the truck lurched forward, throwing gravel and dust into the air as it sped down the road. But the figure didn't disappear. No. It followed. Her the lights in the rearview mirror reflected nothing but darkness. But the cold, the presence, that shadow in the distance, it was still there. Its eyes still gleamed, burning into her soul. The truck skidded around a bend in the road, and Lena's grip on the wheel tightened. She had to get away, had to escape. But the further she drove, the further she felt herself being pulled in toward something she couldn't outrun, towards something she couldn't understand. She glanced in the rearview mirror again, but this time, it wasn't the figure she saw. It was something far worse. The road was vanishing. Lena's eyes were locked on the flickering highway sign up ahead. The rest stop was just a mile or so away, but as her truck rolled forward, she felt the sudden, suffocating pressure in her chest. The pull. It was like an invisible hand was wrapping around her heart, squeezing it tighter with every mile. She didn't want to stop, didn't want to go anywhere near that place, but the road seemed to be guiding her there. A force outside her control. She hadn't passed it on the way through. She was sure of it. This stretch of highway had been empty when she came by, but now the sign was there, flashing with faded, uneven lights. Rest stop number 6. Lena's hands gripped the wheel harder. Something was terribly wrong. She glanced at her GPS. No mention of any rest stop for miles. Her breath caught in her throat. Rest stop number 6. It wasn't even on the map. She slammed her foot on the brake, throwing the truck into a sharp, unnatural stop on the side of the road. Her headlights bathed the rest stop in harsh white light. It looked too perfect, as if it hadn't been touched in years. The little parking lot was empty, but there was a sense of life there, as if the place had just been waiting for her. There it was again, the pull, the gnawing sense that something was beckoning her forward, urging her to step inside. Her eyes were drawn to the dark windows of the building, the broken vending machine by the door, the empty plastic chairs scattered around like abandoned toys. Lena's heart hammered in her chest, but she couldn't look away. The rest stop. This place that shouldn't even exist was calling her. I didn't have a choice. She turned the wheel slowly, her gut tightening with each movement as she drove into the lot. The truck rolled forward like it had a mind of its own. The doors to the rest stop creaked open when she parked in front, and still she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched from every corner. Lena sat for a moment in the cab, the engine idling as her eyes darted around the dark parking lot. The shadows were too thick, too heavy, and the silence, it was deafening. No wind, no animals, no distant sounds of passing cars, nothing but the steady hum of her truck's engine. She reached for the door handle, hesitated, then grabbed it and swung it open. The cold hit her hard, not a chill, a bite, a sharp, biting cold that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to drive away, but her legs were already moving, carrying her to the entrance of the rest stop. She couldn't stop herself. The pull was stronger now, insistent. The moment she stepped inside, the air seemed to thicken. The lobby was small, with a counter behind scratched plexiglass, an old coffee pot bubbling away in the corner, and the smell of stale air that hadn't been disturbed in ages. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the room, and yet it felt wrong, like something about the place shouldn't exist. But there was something else. A presence. An energy in the room, like they were already here. Lena glanced around, heart racing. The place looked abandoned, but somehow it felt like it wasn't. Like someone or something was waiting for her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood straight up. She quickly glanced around, but no one was there. She was alone, or at least, she thought she was. Lena took a few more hesitant steps into the lobby. Then the door to the bathroom creaked open on its own. Her stomach dropped. For a moment everything was still. Even the static in her head seemed to pause. Then, from inside the bathroom, she heard a sound, a rustle like someone shifting on the floor, a soft, wet sound, and then the sound of something dragging. Her mind screamed for her to turn around, to run, but her feet were glued to the floor. She could feel the weight of the room pressing down on her, the pressure on her chest like the walls were closing in. Lena stepped forward slowly, one foot in front of the other, her breath shallow. Every step felt like it was pulling her deeper into the unknown. She didn't know why, but she couldn't stop herself. She had to find out. The bathroom door swung open with a groan, revealing a narrow hallway bathed in the same sickly yellow light that filled the rest of the building. She wasn't ready for what she saw. There, standing in the doorway of the bathroom, was a figure, tall, thin, cloaked in shadows. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The figure's features were obscured by the darkness, but she could see its eyes. Dark, hollow eyes that seemed to see through her, past her. She could feel it staring at her, its presence weighing on her. And then it spoke, its voice low and gravelly, seeping into her brain like a disease. "You shouldn't have come here." Lena stumbled back, her heart leaping into her throat. "You shouldn't have come here." The words echoed in her mind, and she felt the temperature in the room drop, the air turning to ice, as if the figure was pulling the warmth from the very walls around her. But it wasn't just the cold, it was the fear, the terror that washed over her, making her feel small, vulnerable. Who are you?" Lena's voice was barely a whisper, tremulous, but the words left her mouth before she could stop them. The figure didn't answer. It only stepped forward, its footfalls heavy on the ground. As it came closer, Lena could make out more details. The dark silhouette of its form, the ragged edges of its cloak, and the hands. Lena's throat went dry. Its hands were gnarled, twisted, long fingers that ended in jagged claws. They reached toward her with slow, deliberate movements. "Please, no," she whispered, but it felt like the world around her had turned to static, like her voice didn't matter. The figure's mouth opened, and the air seemed to hum with a terrible energy. "You are not leaving," and with that everything went black. You ever have that moment where you swear someone's looking right at you, but when you turn around there's no one there? Now imagine that feeling doesn't go away. Imagine it follows you, clings to you, seeps into the seams of your skin. That's where Lena was now. She'd been driving blind for what felt like hours, chasing headlights into fog that shouldn't exist in the Arizona desert. The road had stopped making sense a long time ago, twisting on itself, turning corners that shouldn't have been there, repeating stretches of highway like some kind of broken vinyl track. The landscape outside had gone all wrong too, scrub brush fading into black sand, Joshua trees warping in the moonlight, the stars overhead, rearranging themselves into unfamiliar constellations. But the worst part? It was the quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get in the dead of night on the interstate, where the only sound is your engine and maybe some coyotes off in the hills. No. This quiet was thick. It swallowed up the truck's rumble, blanketed every sound in something deeper, something darker, a silence that didn't just surround her, it watched her and Lena. Lena could feel it, like she was being followed by something she couldn't see. The CB had gone cold. After the voice said, "You don't get to leave," it had cut out completely. Not even static now, just dead air. But every once in a while, the speaker popped, like something was still on the line, waiting. She caught herself checking the mirrors too often. Every few seconds, really, even when she knew there was nothing there. And then, one time, just once, she saw it again. A flicker of something behind her truck. No headlights, just a presence, dark and tall and too still. She blinked and it was gone. But she didn't believe it had left. That thing, whatever it was, it had followed her off that road. The one that was never built. The one that didn't show up on maps and didn't exist in any dot registry. And now it was with her. Not outside the truck anymore. Inside. The air in the cab had turned heavy, dense, like she was breathing underwater. The kind of thick where your lungs have to work to pull in the next breath. Lena turned the heat off and cracked the window, even though the night was colder than it had any right to be. Her breath fogged the windshield in slow, lazy puffs, and her fingers were starting to go numb on the steering wheel. But it wasn't the cold that scared her. It was the feeling that she wasn't alone anymore. She kept driving, kept watching the road. That's when she noticed it, right at the edge of her vision. Movement, not on the road. Inside the cab, just behind the passenger seat, a shadow, slender, shifting. Her heart kicked into high gear. She jerked the wheel a little, trying not to swerve, eyes darting to the rear view. Nothing. But she felt it. That gaze, that crawling sensation on the back of her neck. She swallowed hard, forcing her eyes forward. "You're not real," she said aloud, her voice hoarse. "You're just in my head." And then the CB clicked. Not the full static burst, not the usual kachka, just the click. Like someone had picked up the mic. Her hand hovered over it, trembling. It clicked again. She didn't want to press the talk button. Every cell in her body screamed not to. But that same invisible pull from before, like gravity aimed wrong, it tugged at her hand. She touched the mic, and the whisper came through, so quiet, so damn soft it barely counted as sound. "We're already here." Lena yanked her hand back like it had been burned. The cab shifted. You know that feeling when someone slides into the passenger seat next to you, and the weight of the car just slightly adjusts. That's what happened. But she didn't look, couldn't. She knew someone, something, was sitting right beside her now. She drove like that for what could have been minutes. Maybe longer. Afraid to blink, afraid to speak, the voice returned. "Why are you afraid?" It didn't come through the CB this time. It came from the seat next to her. She kept her eyes on the road, jaw tight, hands gripping the wheel until her knuckles went white. "You called us," it said. "When you tuned in." "No," she whispered, though her throat burned. "You did," the voice said. "You opened the channel. You gave us your name." And she had. Back on that lonely highway before it all started, she'd said it over the CB. "Breaker 19, this is Blue Thunder." That was all it took. Names had power. Everyone knew that, even if they pretended not to. The figure shifted beside her. She still didn't look, couldn't. "Why do you drive, Lena?" She didn't answer. "You run, that's what you do. From the crash, from your ghosts, from what's behind you." Her throat tightened. "You don't talk about the crash." Not even to yourself. But this thing, this voice, it knew. You think if you stay on the move, you'll outrun them. But we don't live on roads, Lena. The air turned to frost creeping up the inside of the windshield. We live in frequencies. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She reached blindly to the passenger seat, half expecting her hand to touch nothing but leather. But what she touched was cold and wet and grasped her back. Her scream was strangled in her throat. The truck jolted, tires skidding slightly. She yanked, the wheel just in time to avoid drifting off the road, heart hammering, breath ragged. Finally she looked, and the seat was empty, but the handprint remained, clear as day, impressed in the condensation on the inside of the windshield, not hers, and behind the handprint, a face, pressed into the glass. No eyes, just a wide, crooked smile. She blinked, gone, but she knew, deep in her gut, that it wasn't. Finished. The unseen had seen her, and it wasn't going back into the static.